There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Tower on the beat.
The video you are about to watch is protected by the Corporation of the United States of America and parent company the District of Columbia's Constitution Bill of Rights Amendment 1, Free Speech and Free Press. We are also protected under the United Nations General Assembly Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People or D.R.I.P. also known as DRIP Articles 14 and 16 Article 14.
Alright, American History, Act 7, Part 2. This is going to be Fusang and Tartaria. I needed to make a Part 2 because there's a lot of information. Before we even talk about Fusang and what that is and how that relates to Tartaria or to America, I gotta go back, and I encourage anybody to go back and see the first video. Alright, so we was talking about Tartaria, Tartaria, right? Like this mysterious ass country that kinda exists, don't exist, find it on some maps. It's just popping up now. Everybody wants to know about this country. I talked about it before, and my suspicions is getting, warmer and warmer. Alright? This place definitely existed. Alright? And this latter part of my first video, I kinda went in with Tartaria and Tartaria, how they relate. I showed you the kind of and that looks real mud floody right there with the architectural feats of this land region and the Asian steppes, the Central Asia, Tartaria, Afghanistan, all these kind of weird Soviet states and stuff. It's a beautiful palace. It's some of the most beautiful and cleanest cities I've ever seen in my life. A mix of Persia, Rome. I mean, look at this place right here. It's one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever seen in my life. Beautiful. All right, we can't build like it today. This city right here in Kazakhstan, it rivals any Asian modern city today in Korea or Japan. We see a map of America, but I want to go into Fusang and this mysterious colony of Chinese Buddhist monks and priests who kind of made it here to America and set up shop. This might go into why we have so many Mongols here already, especially going towards the West Coast. All right, do you think the San Francisco Chinese, do you think they came as immigrants, or the Vancouver Chinese, they came as immigrants, or maybe they were here when the white man came? You gotta think about these things. You gotta stop thinking in a Eurocentric mindset and start thinking of a mindset of a whole world-centric, a geocentric kind of mindset of history. The Asians knew about this. They've been traveling, they had people here, they had colonies. So where is Fusang really? Well, according to a lot of the stories and the data given, Fusang was here in North America, primarily in the West Coast. Some say Mexico, some maps have it in the Vancouver area, which, like I said, there's a lot of Asians in that Vancouver area. Were they always there? Were they always in that Washington area? I would say yeah, because the maps don't lie, man. They tell you, I just showed you, there's a colony there. The Asians been here, man. The Chinese been here. You gotta give it up to the Chinese. So maybe they did have colonies. Maybe there was 13 colonies of Fusang on the West Coast, while the 13 colonies of the Europeans was on the East Coast. These people mixed in with the Aboriginals, and this is why we have Mongol Indians. On top of them just coming here, for thousands of years. There was a multiracial, multicultural people here. Not everybody's Aboriginal, not everybody's indigenous, but you damn sure had Native Americans here who weren't necessarily what you would call the Aboriginal or black stock. And you damn sure had the black Aboriginals who were here, and a mixture of both. Not to mention pure of both sides. And, looks like there's a lot of whites here too. So Borat and his, Tartarian comrades, I guess, made it over here. One way or another. Who knows who those people exactly were? That was a multicultural society and they were here. Look at this map right here. This map right here shows you, I know it's kind of blurry. I try to get the best, but it says Region Tartarium, as you see it right there. This is in America. That means Tartar Kingdom. So on maps in America, you have it's saying this is like owned by the Tartarian Kingdom.
The reservations that you've approved, you, sir, in your great wisdom have approved, I will tell you right now, they don't look like Indians to me. They don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like Indians to Indians, and a lot of people are laughing at. They don't look like Indians to me, sir.
How many men, from how many nations, voyaged to the American continents before Columbus? It seems quite likely, a Buddhist named U.S.S.R. in 458 AD. He left a written record. After the ludicrous uproar last October over the Vinland map, which we published jointly with the Yale University Press, it seems wise to remind the ethnically sensitive that this is not a new story, although modern archaeological studies in Mexico seem to be adding new evidence to back up old conjectures. U.S.S.R.'s voyage from China, 500 years before Leif Erikson and 1,000 before Columbus, lies been almost totally ignored by modern American historians, yet a rather considerable number of learned papers, articles, and even books were once written about him by Western scholars who believed that he crossed the Pacific, and landed on the west coast of this continent, which he described as the wonderful land of Fusang in the year 458. The great Alexander von Humboldt called him the Leif Erikson of China, and the land of Fusang the Vinland of the West. The French sinologues de Cignes and Paravy believed that he reached California. The German Carl Friedrich Neumann identified the land of Fusang as Mexico. One American, Charles G. Leland, wrote a monograph called Fusang, London, 1875. Another, Edward P. Vining, compiled an 800-page encyclopedic volume about the man he regarded as an inglorious Columbus, New York, 1885. Dr. Charles E. Chapman, in his History of California, the Spanish Period, New York, 1921, devoted a chapter to him entitled The Chinese Along the Pacific Coast in Ancient Times. U.S.S.R., whose name, also written as Hoi Xin, means very intelligent in Chinese, was a Chaman, or mendicant Buddhist priest, from Afghanistan who first came to China as a very young missionary about the year 450. The period was one of great expansion for Buddhism, and extraordinary journeys made by Chamen on land and sea were not at all uncommon. This one seems to have left China almost immediately, in the company of 4 fellow priests, on a missionary journey to evangelize new lands. His report indicates that they sailed northeast of Japan to the land of Tahan, the Kamchatka Peninsula in Siberia, and from there traveled 20,000 to, about 6,600 miles, east to the land of Fusang. This distance and direction suggest that they went by a coasting, island-hopping route across the North Pacific, past the Aleutian Islands to Alaska, and down the west coast of America as far as Mexico. There, apparently, they remained for 40 years, observing the country, its people, its customs, crafts, plants, and animals, and diffusing Buddhism among the inhabitants. At that period in Europe the Roman Empire was still in existence, and Fiancé and Germany, still known as Gaul, were peopled by tribes of Goths. No one, as far as is known, had ever attempted at least deliberately to cross the mysterious ocean named for Atlantis, whose ancient civilization and disappearance had been related by Egyptian priests. Diodorus of Sicily said that the Phoenicians, expert seamen 1,500 years before Christ, venturing out beyond the Pillars of Hercules on their circumnavigation of Africa, were blown by a storm to a large, fertile, prosperous land in the west, whose citizens enjoyed much leisure time. After he returned to China in the year 499, U.S.S.R. appeared before the Emperor Wu Ti. A kind of Marco Polo in reverse, possibly the first Oriental to have seen the West. He was then a very old man. Overcome with emotion and weeping, he presented the emperor with gifts from the land of Fusang and gave him a lengthy, detailed account of his travels. It was by no means the first time the emperor had heard of this wondrous country. Long before U.S.S.R's time, Fusang was already well known to the Chinese, in poetry and fairy tale, as a kind of earthly paradise across the Pacific, where everything grew to supernatural size, trees a mile high, silkworms 7 feet long, birds with 3 legs, etc. In China, Fusang is still synonymous, at least it was in pre-communist days, with fabulous or super or colossal. Hangzhou merchants, for example, used to advertise Fusang silk or Fusang porcelain, meaning something out of this world. But was Fusang out of this world? Consider for a moment the thought-provoking words of one Chinese poet of the 3rd century: east of the Eastern Ocean lie / the shores of the land of Fusang. / if, after landing there, you travel / east for 10,000 li / you will come to another ocean, blue / vast, huge, boundless. Behind the fiction may have been the fact of earlier discoveries and exploration. The Chinese are thought to be the first people to have developed the arts of boat building and navigation. The tall trees of the fairy tale may have been, originally, California redwood seen by some ancient mariner from the east. On our Pacific coast, there have been some interesting amateur discoveries. In 1882, a cache of Chinese brass coins, said to have been dated 1200 BC, was dug up by miners at a place called C.C.C.P in British Columbia, along with a bronze fan bearing Chinese characters. Strange implements, believed to be Oriental, have also been unearthed in the Northwest, while Indian legends all along that coast tell of men and ships that arrived there long before the Europeans. The story of U.S.S.R, however, is unique in being the only actual record yet found that may be an historical account of such an east-west contact. There are 3 remarkable things about his report that strengthen the belief that he may have been our real discoverer. One is its basic historicity. It is not a work of fiction. We are not confronted here with the fantasy literature of the earlier Fusang fairy tale, but with a soberly written text preserved as such by a people who possess the oldest continuous, professionally written history in the world. Its hero and its content have been checked by careful research and found to be congruent with other well-known persons and events. There seems to be no doubt that U.S.S.R was a real person who was thought by his contemporaries to have made a most unusual voyage east of China. On his return to Qingchao, he was ordered by the emperor to tell his tale to the courtier Prince Yuki, who entered it in the imperial archives as one of the noteworthy happenings of the year 499. It was later published, about the year 600, by the historian Li Yanchu, whose records of the Liang dynasty form part of the great annals of ancient China known as the 22 historians. The second remarkable feature in U.S.S.R's story is the almost incredible accuracy of the distance between Asia and America, and the plausibility of his route. Fusang is located, he said, 20,0002 east of the country of Tahan, figuring the Chinese 2 at about 1/3 of a mile, and follow a course along the coasts and islands from Kamchatka, Tahan, past the Komandarskis and the Aleutians, then along the coast of Canada and the United States. You will end with astonishing accuracy in the neighborhood of Acapulco, the principal western seaport of Mexico. You will also see that the general direction east is not by any means inaccurate for such a journey. Contrary to a common misconception created by the problem of conveniently printing a Mercator projection map of North America on a page, our western coastline does not run north and south but at about a 45-degree angle toward the east. In other words, almost due southeast Orientals in ancient times must have extended across the South Pacific by way of Polynesia to Peru. But that route involves a jump of more than 4,000 miles across open sea. In that era before the oceans were charted and men knew in advance where they were going, surely the North Pacific was far more natural if not necessarily easier way to go. Asia and North America are practically joined together at Herring Strait, The classic theory regarding the origin of the American Indians is that they migrated from Asia across the land bridge that existed there in prehistoric times, and the sea route along the Aleutian chain is such that even a small, slow, primitive type of vessel can follow it without ever being long out of sight of land. At only one point between the Commanderskis and the Aleutians there is a stretch of some 200 miles of open ocean, and even their land can sometimes be seen. It has been reported that on exceptionally clear days pt2 has been sighted from Siberia. A strong warm current, known as the Japan Current, or Black Stream, flows eastward along it all the way to Lower California. As it leaves Japan and passes the Kuril Islands toward Kamchatka, the current reaches a speed of from 75 to 100 miles a day, providing a very effective first stage thrust for a trans-Pacific voyage. In 1774, for instance, the Spanish explorer Juan Bautista de Anza, marching overland from Arizona to what he called the Philippine Ocean, saw the wreck of an exotic-looking ship of non-European construction on the rocks near the mission of Carmel. The third and the most remarkable quality of U.S.S.R's story is the way in which his descriptions of the people and the places he visited correspond with the North Pacific route and with what is known about America at that period. For example, he wrote, "The land of marked bodies is situated 7,000 li 2,300 miles northeast of Japan. Its people have marks or stripes on their bodies like wild animals. In front they have 3 marks. If the marks are large and straight they belong to the upper class, but if the marks are small and crooked they belong to the lower class. This distance and direction indicate that the land of marked bodies must have been in or near Alaska." Now hear what Bancroft, the historian for excellence of our Pacific states, says of Alaskan traditions. At Point Barrow the women have on the chin a vertical line about half an inch broad in the center, extending from the lip, with a parallel but narrower one on either side of it, a little apart. Some have 2 vertical lines protruding from either angle of the mouth, a mark of their high position in the tribe. But it is above all U.S.S.R's description of the land of Fusang that fascinates scholars. That region has many Fusang trees, he said, and these give it its name. The Fusang's leaves resemble those of the tiung, and its first sprouts are like bamboo shoots. The people of the country eat them. The fruit is like a pear but reddish. They spin thread from the bark and make coarse cloth from which they make clothing, and from it they also make a finer fabric. The wood is used to build houses and they use Fusang bark to make paper. Fusang was named for the Fusang tree. In no other country in the world is there a plant put to such uses as those described by U.S.S.R. The sprouts of the century plant do resemble those of the bamboo and the people do eat them. The plant does furnish a rough sort of thread from which a kind of hempen cloth is made, and also a fine variety resembling linen. Furthermore, paper is made from the fiber. He might have added that the century plant, or maguey as it is called in Mexico, genus agave in Latin, is often described by travelers as a tree. As residents of our southwestern states are aware, it sends up a tall, branching, beautifully flowered, candelabra-like stalk that often reaches a height of 30 feet. They have a system of writing, his report continues. But they have no fortresses or walled cities, no military weapons or soldiers, and they do not wage war in that kingdom. The ground contains no iron, said U.S.S.R, but it has copper. The people do not value gold and silver. Iron, of course, existed in Mexico, but its use was unknown before the time of the Spaniards, who were the first to mine it. Metals never had a great importance in American cultures. Metals were for luxury rather than for their practical usefulness. Nevertheless, especially among the Tarascos, copper was abundantly used to make needles, pliers, awls, hatchets, and the cutting edges of farm tools. The Tarascos, incidentally, were a tribe who lived in western Mexico, the region where U.S.S.R would have landed. His reference to the Mexicans' indifference toward gold and silver is also borne out by eyewitness accounts of the Spaniards. Bernal Diaz, one of Cortés' lieutenants, describing the marketplace of Mexico City, in his discovery and conquest of Mexico, stated that gold and silver, far from being used as money, were bought and sold like other commodities and paid for with the regular currency of the country, which was cocoa.
Fusang.
Chapter 2. Identity of the Tartars and North American Indians on the R.O.A.D to America, and the people in it. The Tungus, Mongolians, and a great part of the Turkish race, formed originally, according to all external organic tokens, as well as the elements of their languages, but one people, closely allied with the Eskimo, the Sri-Isling, or dwarf of the Norsemen, and the races of the New World. This is the irrefutable result to which O.LL the more recent inquiries in anatomy and physiology, as well as comparative philology and history, have conduced. All the Aboriginal Americans have those distinctive tokens which forcibly recall their neighbors dwelling on the other side of Bering Straits. They have the four-cornered head, high cheekbones, heavy jaws, large angular eye cavities, and a retreating forehead. The skulls of the oldest Peruvian graves exhibit the same tokens as the heads of the nomadic tribes of Oregon and California. The different American languages, as has been already proved by Albert Gallatin in his Minute Researches, have such an identity, that we can, however varied the vocabulary, at once reduce them to the narrative of Hoi Shin. One original source. In fact, all researches as to the manner in which America was first populated lead to one inevitable conclusion. Since the earth has been inhabited, these rude tribes dwelt in their separate divisions of Asia and America. This rough mass has, during the course of centuries, been separated by different corporal and mental formative influences into different nations, each with peculiar bodily distinct ions, the natural consequence of higher mento.L influences, and various languages have been developed, yet all of these distinctions, whether of body or of language, of manner, or custom, present internal evidence of an original unity. This unity manifests itself in their genealogies, the oldest historical system of all nations by which the identity of the Turks, Mongolians, and Tungus is clearly proved. Among these Tartaric hordes we find absolutely the same relation as that which existed among the German nations. The Ostrogoths and Visigoths, the Westphalians, the northern and southern nations, belonged originally, notwithstanding their different destinies and culture, to the internal being of one and the same man race. All the numerous Tartaric hordes dwelling about the northeast of the Central Empire were termed by the civilized natives of the South Tonghu, Eastern Red Men, or savages, from which appellation we derive our word Tungus, which has been subsequently applied to an extremely limited portion of the entire race. Among these Mongolian nations, many centuries before Genghis Khan, Tchinks-Chakhan, the Mongolians proper were distinguished by the differently written name of Wag or Mog, and divided into 7 hordes, dwelling in different places, extending from the Korean peninsula to the distant north, over the river Emo to the eastern sea, that is to say, to the Gulf of Anadyr or Bering Straits. The nomadic tribes dwelling more directly to the north they termed petty, or northern savages, and many tribes were reckoned by them as belonging either to the Tungus or petty. During the course of many centuries the Chinese acquired a surprisingly accurate knowledge of the northeast coast of Asia, extending, as their records in astronomy and natural history proves, to the 65th degree of latitude, and even to the Arctic Ocean. Among other accounts, they tell us of a land very far from the Central Kingdom, whose inhabitants, termed Kalihan, or Koran, sent during the latter part of the 7th century ambassadors to the court at Singen. This land lay on the North Sea, and still further to the north, or the other side of that sea, and the nights in proportion so short, that the sun set and rose again before one could roast a leg of mutton. 1. The Chinese were well acquainted with the customs of these tribes, and describe them to us as resembling the Tsohukchi or Kalchiskans of the present day, and other tribes of northeastern Asia and northwestern America. They had neither oxen, sheep, nor other domestic animals, but there were tribes among them which employed deer, which were their very numerous. These deer of which they speak were undoubtedly reindeer. They knew nothing of agriculture, but lived by hunting and fishing, as well as on the root of a certain point which grew there in abundance. Their dwellings were constructed of twigs and wood, their clothes were made of furs and feathers. They laid their dead in coffins, which they placed in trees in the mountains. They were ignorant of any subdivisions of the year. The Chinese were also as well acquainted with those dwelling more directly to the east, as with these inhabitants of the north.
From top to the opposite peninsula is about 150 German miles, and in fact, the natives generally require 10 to 15 days to make the voyage. This is from Asia to America, so 10 to 15 days. It's not a lot at all at sea for experienced seamen. Fusang, man. What do you think? I think, the Chinese have one of the longest and oldest continuous professional written histories in the world. All right, there's no doubt about that. But the whole thing with the Chinese is they lie a lot. They have a lot of propaganda. All right, so it's kind of iffy when it comes to them because they do lie about a lot of shit. So you gotta take that for what it is too. But this is like I said, on maps you see Fusang right there, right in that kind of Vancouver area. The Chinese, they have maps older than the Europeans have with the whole world in it. So homeboy, he did go to America. You know what I mean? Don't let these people fool you. Warrat always been here. Not always been here, but he been here a long time. Alright, with his Tartarian buddies, whether they the Mongols, whether they Hindus or whoever, Indians, they, Tartaria was here. America had Tartarian places, Tartarian colonies, Asian colonies here, all right? Stay tuned to Action News Network as we go down this rabbit hole. Peace.